My boss fired me for being too expensive after 18 years leading engineering. His panic calls. We can hire 3 junior engineers for your salary. He smirked during my termination meeting. Nothing personal, just cost cutting. My name is Victor Hale, 55 years old. For the past 18 years, I served as the lead systems engineer at Veltria Housing. I built their entire infrastructure from the ground up, designed every expansion, and kept things running so smoothly that the executives eventually forgot how much they depended on me, until they decided they couldn't afford me anymore. Across the table sat Graham Vickers, the new CTO. He'd only been with the company 6 months. 42 years old, Cornell, MBA, designer glasses. He was hired to modernize operations. Apparently, modernization meant cutting out the people with the most experience. Beside him sat Diane from HR, sliding a folder toward me. The severance package is generous. 2 months' salary plus your accrued vacation time. I nodded, took the folder, and asked, "Is that all you have to say?" Graham looked almost disappointed. Maybe he'd expected me to argue, to threaten legal action, something he could report back to the board as proof that I was difficult. "What would you like me to say?" I asked. "Most people in your position have questions, concerns," he replied. I shrugged. Seems pretty straightforward to me. They didn't understand. I wasn't calm. I was done. There's a difference. "Well, we'd appreciate your help with the transition," Graham added. "The new engineering team will need some guidance on the system architecture. Perhaps a consulting arrangement for a few weeks." "I'll think about it," I lied. I knew I wouldn't. We shook hands. I packed 18 years of work into a single cardboard box and walked out. A few colleagues glanced away awkwardly, worried they might be next. As I reached my truck, my phone buzzed. A text from Alan, the database administrator I'd hired 12 years ago. "Vic, the whole team's freaking out." I didn't reply. That evening, I sat on the deck overlooking Lake Ontario, bourbon in hand, watching the sunset bleed into the water. My wife, Elaine, placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "What do you do now?" she asked. I shrugged. "Something will turn up." What Graham didn't know, what he hadn't bothered to find out, was that I hadn't just built their systems. I had personally written large portions of the custom code, with minimal documentation, because the company had always refused to fund a proper documentation team. Only I knew the redundancies, the hidden security layers, the intricate architecture, and I wasn't planning on explaining any of it. I started with the company back when it was still Bayview Properties, a small real estate firm with just 4 apartment complexes and a dozen employees. Their IT infrastructure was 2 desktops, a fax machine, and dial-up internet. The owner, Harold Bay, hired me away from a consulting gig in Syracuse. "We're expanding," he told me. "We need someone who can build us something solid." And that's exactly what I did. Over the next 18 years, I transformed that tiny setup into a fully integrated property management system, handling tenant applications, background checks, automated maintenance requests, and rent collection across 63 properties in 4 states. Piece by piece, I built it, upgraded it, and refined it as the company grew. When Harold retired 5 years ago, his son sold the business to a private equity firm, which rebranded it as Veltria Housing. They kept me on, impressed with what I'd built. But things changed. New executives, new priorities. Quarterly targets suddenly mattered more than long-term stability. The warning signs came gradually. First, they rejected my proposal for a documentation team. Too expensive. Then came the consultants, the young MBA types with buzzwords about disruption and cloud solutions. They'd sit through my architecture explanations with glazed eyes, then recommend cookie-cutter systems that could never integrate with what we had. I pushed back every time, explaining why their ideas wouldn't work, showing them the custom code that made our system unique. Eventually, they stopped inviting me to meetings altogether. Elaine noticed before I did. One night at dinner, she said, "They're pushing you out. You need to prepare." I brushed it off. They need me. No one else understands how the whole system works. Her reply cut deep. Maybe that's exactly the problem. 6 months ago, they hired Graham, and from day one, he made it clear he wanted to replace everything I'd built. After Graham came on board, he hired 3 junior engineers fresh out of college. He had them shadow me, peppering me with questions about the system. I answered politely, but I could tell they weren't grasping the complexities. How could they? It had taken me years to design those systems, to understand the interdependencies, to create the redundancies that kept everything running smoothly when problems inevitably arose. Last week, Graham stopped by my office. "Quick meeting tomorrow morning," he said casually. "Just a quarterly check-in." I should have seen it coming. The first call came 2 weeks after my termination. I was in my home office updating my resume when my phone buzzed. "Graham Vickers." I'll let go to voicemail. "Victor, it's Graham. We're having some issues with the tenant portal. The junior team is working on it, but they're struggling to understand your code architecture. Could you give us a quick call back? Just a short consultation." I deleted the message and went back to my resume. 3 more calls came that day, each voicemail sounding more desperate than the last. By evening, Alan texted me. "System's been down all day. Maintenance requests aren't processing. Graham's losing his mind." The next morning, Diane from HR called. "Victor, I hope you're doing well. I'm reaching out because we'd like to discuss a consulting arrangement, just temporary, to help with some current system issues. The compensation would be quite generous." I picked up the phone. "How generous?" $300 an hour, minimum 4-hour engagement. "I'll think about it and get back to you," I said, then hung up. I sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the lake. Elaine set a cup of coffee in front of me. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking they're finally finding out exactly what I'm worth." Over the next 3 days, the calls didn't stop. Graham, Diane, even Justin Bay, Harold's son, still sitting on the board. The tenant portal had collapsed. The maintenance scheduling system was spitting errors. The automatic payment processing had failed. Thousands of residents were affected. I didn't answer any of them. On the 4th day, an email arrived from Devlin Systems, one of Veltria's regional competitors. They weren't as big, but they were growing fast. The message came from their director of technology, Lawrence Devlin himself. "Victor, I heard about your situation at Veltria. We've always admired your work from afar. Would you be interested in discussing opportunities with us? We're planning to upgrade our entire property management infrastructure." I replied immediately and scheduled a meeting for the next day. That evening, as Elaine and I were preparing dinner, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Graham Vickers standing on my porch. His designer glasses were crooked, his normally perfect suit wrinkled. He looked nothing like the polished executive who'd fired me. "Victor," he said, out of breath, "I apologize for dropping by unannounced, but we have an emergency situation. The entire system is down. Nothing is working. The team can't figure out what's wrong or how to fix it." I leaned against the doorframe. "That sounds serious." "It is," he admitted. "We need your help. The board has authorized me to offer you a substantial consulting fee, $500 per hour, whatever it takes." I thought about the cardboard box in my garage, 18 years of my life reduced to a few mementos. I thought about Graham's smirk during my termination meeting. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. I thought about the documentation team they never approved, the warnings they never listened to. I looked him in the eye and said quietly, "I'm sorry to hear about your troubles, but I have an interview tomorrow. Something will turn up, just like I thought." I closed the door on Graham's stunned face and went back to making dinner. For the first time since my termination, I felt a wave of peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just clarity. I wasn't going to help them fix what they'd broken. The next day, I met with Lawrence Devlin at a coffee shop in downtown Rochester, neutral ground, away from either company's offices. "I've followed your work for years," Lawrence said, stirring his coffee. "That integrated property management system you built at Veltria is legendary. Nobody else has anything like it." "Thank you," I replied. "It took time." "That's exactly what I want to talk about, time. We're expanding, and we need a system that's not just sleek but reliable. Someone who understands architecture, integration points, and security layers. Someone who can build something better than anything else out there." "I'm interested," I said. Lawrence smiled. "Good, because I'm prepared to offer you the role of chief systems architect. Full benefits, stock options, and a salary 20% higher than what you were making at Veltria." It was an incredible offer. Almost too good. "Why me?" I asked. "There are younger, cheaper engineers out there." He chuckled. You sound like your former employer. We tried that route. 3 bright young grads from top schools. They built something sleek and modern that crashes every time we hit 100 users. We don't need cheap. We need reliable. I accepted the offer the very next day. Meanwhile, Veltria's problems kept getting worse. Alan sent me occasional updates. Critical functions were failing. They'd even hired an expensive consulting firm to salvage the legacy system. A week into my new role at Devlin, Graham called again. "Victor, please, this is serious. We've lost 3 months of payment records. Tenants are complaining about incorrect charges. The consultants say they need your input on the database structure." I considered ignoring him, but something made me pick up. "Graham, I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. I can't help you. We'll double whatever they're paying you. Just 2 days of your time. It's not about the money." "Then what? Revenge? Are you enjoying watching us struggle?" I paused. "No, Graham. I'm not enjoying it. But you made a business decision. You decided my experience wasn't worth the cost. Now you're learning what that really means. The board wants to discuss bringing you back," he pressed. "Full salary plus a signing bonus." For a moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it faded quickly. Going back would solve nothing. The same executives who called me expendable would be waiting for the next excuse to cut costs. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but I've made a commitment to Devlin Systems." His tone hardened. "There could be legal implications, Victor, if we find you intentionally made our systems difficult to maintain. Non-compete clauses, intellectual property concerns." There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. "The system is exactly as it was when you repeatedly denied my request for a documentation team," I said evenly. "Every line of code belongs to Veltria. As per my contract, I've taken nothing with me but my experience. Have your lawyers call mine if you'd like." I hung up. My hands shook, not from fear but from anger. The accusation of sabotage was the final insult. At Devlin, I was starting fresh, building things the right way this time. Proper documentation, training programs, redundancies to prevent disasters like the one Veltria was drowning in. I wasn't going to look back, and I sure wasn't going to bail them out. Some lessons had to be learned the hard way. A month later, I had a surprise visitor at my new office. Alan, my former database administrator, stood in the doorway with a laptop bag. "Got time for lunch?" he asked. "Over sandwiches at a noisy deli." He leaned in. "It's worse than you think. They've lost access to historical data, 3 years' worth. The backups are corrupted. The consultants say they may have to rebuild from scratch." I wasn't surprised. The backup system had redundancies and security protocols that had to be followed precisely. Skip one step, and the whole process collapsed. A feature, not a flaw, designed to protect tenant data. "That's not all," Alan continued. "I found something in the archives while helping the consultants. Graham had been planning your termination for months, meeting with the board, convincing them your custom infrastructure was too expensive to maintain." "How do you know?" I asked. Alan opened his laptop and showed me emails, correspondence between Graham and the board. They laid out a legacy staff reduction plan, with me listed as the first target. He'd promised they could replace me with cheaper engineers and migrate to off-the-shelf systems within 6 months. His projected savings? Over $1 million a year. I scrolled through the messages, feeling strangely detached. One line from Graham stood out. "Hale's custom systems are unnecessarily complex. He's made himself indispensable by design, not necessity." "There's more," Alan said. "The private equity firm that owns Veltria has been planning to sell for over a year. They've been cutting costs and gutting staff to make the books look good. Graham had been brought in for one purpose: slash costs and make the company look profitable just long enough to sell." Suddenly, everything made sense. The push for standardization, the refusal to document, the cuts to senior staff. It was never about improvement. It was about a quick flip. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. Alan closed his laptop. "Because I quit yesterday, and I'm not the only one. Half the IT department is gone. The consultants say it'll take at least 6 months to restore full functionality, maybe longer." He hesitated, then added quietly, and Veltria's biggest client, Westbrook Properties, is threatening to walk. They've lost all faith in the system. I froze. Westbrook alone made up nearly 30% of Veltria's revenue. Losing them would be devastating. What about you? I asked. Alan smiled. Actually, I was hoping Devlin might be hiring database admins. That afternoon, I spoke to Lawrence. Alan was hired immediately. We were rebuilding, brick by brick, with people who knew how to create systems that lasted. That evening, Graham called again. His voice was no longer sharp, no longer arrogant. Victor, please. It's critical. Westbrook is ready to cancel. The board is questioning me. We need you. I'm sorry, Graham. I can't help you. Name your price. Anything. It's not about price. It's about respect. Respect for the work it takes to build something right. There was silence. Then, in a broken voice, he said, "You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew exactly what would fail and when." No, Graham. I just knew what I had built and what it took to maintain it. Information I try to share with you. Over and over. I hung up, not triumphant, not bitter, just a quiet certainty that some lessons can only be learned through failure. 2 months later, opportunity knocked. Lawrence called me in. Just got off the phone with Jeffrey Westbrook. They're terminating Veltria next month. They want to know if we can handle their portfolio. My heart pounded. Westbrook managed 10,000 units. Taking them on would double Devlin's size overnight. When not ready, I admitted. What would it take to be ready? Lawrence pressed. 3 senior engineers. Dedicated servers. At least 8 weeks of development. Jeffrey was desperate. He gave us 12 weeks and offered to fund the infrastructure expansion. This was it, the turning point. Success would establish us as a serious competitor. Failure would sink us both. That night, I barely slept. I sketched diagrams, mapped data migrations, ran through scaling scenarios. By morning, I had a plan, ambitious but achievable. When I presented it, Lawrence nodded slowly. This is solid, but you've added 3 weeks just for documentation. Non-negotiable, I said. That's where Veltria failed. We document everything. We train the team. No single points of failure. And so began our 12-week war. Alan built a migration tool to translate Veltria's chaotic data. I designed a modular architecture that could scale with Westbrook's growth. We hired ex-Veltria engineers who still believed in real systems, not shortcuts. By week 10, we were ready for the first rollout, 2,000 units in Western New York. If it worked, the rest would follow. That's when I got the email. Justin Bayou, the former owner's son. Victor, I want to apologize. The board didn't realize the consequences of letting you go. Graham is gone. We're collapsing. If you ever want to return, the door is open. I didn't reply. The day before rollout, Lawrence called me in. Jeffrey Westbrook was waiting. He shook my hand firmly. So, you're the architect. Lawrence tells me you've built something that won't collapse every time we grow. Something sustainable. That's the plan, I said. He studied me, then added, I hear you used to work at Veltria. They're finished. Nobody wants to buy them, except one. I didn't need to ask. Lawrence confirmed it. Devlin is considering an acquisition at a fraction of their former value. Jeffrey leaned forward. If that happens, we'll need someone who knows both companies, someone who can salvage what matters and integrate it into your new system. That someone is you. Lawrence looked at me. Are you willing? I thought about it. The system I built, the team they discarded, the company that had thrown me away. And now, everything could come back under my direction. Yes, I said finally. I'm willing. But on one condition, we do it right. Full documentation, proper training, no shortcuts. Agreed, Lawrence said. We've learned that lesson. As I walked back to my office, I felt no vindication, no desire for revenge, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing that good work, done right, eventually speaks for itself. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what had once been Veltria Housing's headquarters. The sign now read Devlin Integrated Property Management. The acquisition had gone through for less than a quarter of what the company had been valued at before my departure. Lawrence and I walked through the office, greeting former Veltria employees who were staying on through the transition. Some looked away awkwardly, others smiled with relief. A few, Those who had worked closely with me over the years nodded with quiet understanding. Graham was gone, along with most of the executive team who had approved my termination. Justin Bayview had stayed on as a consultant, helping ease the transition with legacy clients. When we reached the server room, my old domain, I paused. Through the glass, I could see the hardware I had specified, the blinking lights of systems I had designed. "Want to go in?" Lawrence asked. "No need," I replied. "We'll be migrating everything to the new infrastructure anyway." In the main conference room, the remaining Veltria staff had gathered for the announcement. Lawrence introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer who would be overseeing the technical transition. "Many of you already know Victor," he said. "He built the original systems that ran this company for nearly 2 decades. Now he'll be guiding us through the integration of both companies' technologies into something better than either had before." As I looked out at the faces, some familiar, some new, I felt no triumph, no urge to say, "I told you so." What would be the point? Instead, I spoke briefly about the transition plan, the timeline, and the support available to everyone during the process. I emphasized that no one would be left behind because of cost-cutting measures. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. 1 year after the acquisition, Devlin Integrated Property Management had become the largest property management company in the Northeast. The migration was complete, with all properties now running on the new system I designed, fully documented, properly staffed, and functioning smoothly. On a crisp autumn morning, I drove to the office for a final meeting with Lawrence. The leaves along Lake Ontario had turned brilliant shades of red and gold, a fitting backdrop for the conclusion of this chapter. "The board approved your proposal," Lawrence said as soon as I sat down. "The Technical Education Division will launch next quarter. You'll have full autonomy to design the curriculum and hire instructors. This had been my only condition for staying after the integration was complete. Not a higher title or more money, but the creation of a division dedicated to training the next generation of systems engineers and architects, teaching them not just how to code, but how to build things meant to last." "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." "No, thank you," Lawrence replied. "What you've built here is remarkable. Not just the technology, but the culture around it. The documentation, the knowledge sharing, the emphasis on quality over quick fixes." Later that afternoon, I cleared out my integration office. Unlike my hasty exit from Veltria, this was a planned transition to my new role. As I packed my things, Justin Bayview knocked on the door. "Got a minute?" he asked. We walked to the small courtyard outside the building. "My father asked about you," he said. "He's retired in Florida now, but he still follows company news. He was glad to hear you were back," in a manner of speaking. "How was Harold?" I asked. "Good. Fishing a lot." Justin paused. "He always said letting you go would be the biggest mistake this company could make. Turns out he was right." I nodded, unsure what to say. "I learned something from all this," Justin continued. "Value isn't always visible until it's gone." As I drove home along the lakeshore, I thought about value, of experience of care taken, of doing things right the first time, about systems built to last, and the people who build them. I hadn't sought revenge. I hadn't needed to. I had simply moved forward, building something better, something that would outlast any individual decision or short-term thinking. Sometimes the best response to being undervalued is simply to prove your worth elsewhere and let the results speak for themselves.